We're both in moods. Darren walked in just pissed off. I've woke up pissed off.
Yeah.
It's been getting worse every day. Or
Well,
every
then I'm the
hour of
perfect
day.
guest.
Yes.
It generally takes us a few times to.
Yep.
We've gotten worse at starting the show since we've gotten to past 150 episodes. It's gone down.
Are you going to shut up? Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's go. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm
Just
Darren.
started out. Go ahead. You're good. Go ahead. Well, thanks for joining us, Adam. It's been a pleasure. It's always
That's all the time we have, folks.
According to the World Book, what's the main thing we get from Honduras? You got it too?
Welcome to Irritable Dad Syndrome. We put the K in quality. Here are your hosts, Mike and Darren.
Hi, I'm Darren.
I am Mike.
Welcome to Irritable Dad Syndrome, Cincinnati's comedy podcast. We have a very special episode tonight. For the first time ever, we have a guest who has been on the show not once, but twice before, Adam Nedeff, game show historian, author, and now a big-time, big-shot TV star.
Yeah, he wasn't before. Let's just say, before appearing on Irritable Dad Syndrome, he was
a nobody.
He was none of these things.
Yeah.
Now he's a
now-
big shot. So I'm just saying...
welcome.
I'm not saying that the show made you famous. I'm just saying you were famous-er after the show. That's all I'm saying.
Adam Nedeff, welcome back to Irritable Dad Syndrome, and congratulations on being our first three-timer.
Thank you very much. Off the air, you said I was a three-peater.
Yes.
Which I like the sound of better because I'm perpetually in 8th grade mentally, but I'll go ahead and live with being a three-timer. I'll accept that.
Okay, fantastic. How you doing?
I'm a box of fluffy ducks. How are you guys?
A box of fluffy ducks.
I'm doing okay. I said I was pissed, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, Mike and I both crabby today, but we're excited to have you on the show, and you have lifted both of our moods.
You are
Good.
a good...
You know, there's nothing a talk show guest wants to hear more than we're both in terrible moods. That's the kind of karma that I need. That's the kind of
You are one of our favorite guests.
You are, yeah.
Because you help lift our mood. So that's your job tonight, is put us in a good mood.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the end of this episode, we're happy. I know how energy works. It'll probably suck the energy out of you. You'll be in a crabby mood, but who cares at that point? I don't.
Well, I've been following Adam on the Facebook for a couple of years now. Adam, you're hilarious. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You always seem to, and that's what we try to do on this show, is try to find the positive and to put a nice little ha-ha spin on it. But you make us look like crap every single week. So
yeah. You know, the catch is being in a forum where you don't have to say it out loud and where you can correct your typos. That's the magic of Facebook humor, is you get another shot at it if nobody's clicked like on it yet.
That's true. Well, I mean, in our case, I mean, our episodes generally go between a half hour to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, the streams go for a couple of hours to 3 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a reason that things are left on the floor.
that's right.
There's a reason hard drives have been incinerated at this point.
Yeah.
There's a reason the Patreon costs money.
Yeah. But now, Adam, I don't know if you've listened, but a couple of weeks ago, I went off on a rant about the state of West Virginia. I had to drive through there, and I hit a toll road, and it was $4.25 each time, and I had to stop 3 times. And so I was talking to Mike, and I said, 3 times at $4.25, that's like $50, right?
Yeah.
Ha.
Yeah.
And I'm bitching because I had to pay all this money to drive through for the pleasure of driving through West Virginia. And we posted the reel of it, and some guy called me a very miserable man.
We attracted
hilarious.
our first troll
Yeah.
because he corrected his math.
Yes.
Which I think is wonderful. Because Darren truly felt that $4.25
Was $50
times 3 was $50. Apparently,
Yeah.
this guy was like, I need to save Darren from this.
Yeah.
And calculated it out, copied the calculator onto the TikTok comment, left the comment, and then proceeded to call Darren a miserable man. And that single sentence, "You're a miserable man," brought
I think
me
we're going to put
so
that on
much
t-shirts.
joy
Yeah.
over the holidays. Oh yeah.
So that
Now,
happened.
This is something where I actually do see eye to eye with you, and not because this is an area where my parents and I are not in sync, because where I grew up, in Parkersburg, West Virginia. We're right on the Ohio border, and there are 2 bridges into Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And one is the Marietta Memorial Bridge, which is a toll bridge, and the other is the Belpre Bridge, which is no more than a 5-minute drive from the Marietta Bridge and is not a toll bridge. And my parents always made it a point to keep plenty of change in the car, while I was always of the thinking of, why don't we just drive the extra 5 minutes and not pay?
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's 5 minutes on the West Virginia side. If you're on the Ohio drive, it's a 90-second drive from the Marietta Bridge to the Belpre Bridge.
Yeah.
So, why are we making sure that we have plenty of change in the car at all times when we can just, because Ohio is still probably going to be there if we spend the extra few minutes driving.
Possibly.
And in fact,
let's hope.
we went on a road trip. I went home for the holidays, and we road tripped down to a town called Gallipolis, Ohio, because we had heard that they have really nice Christmas lights.
That's where I was. That's where I was born. Gallipolis.
Okay.
I was born in Gallipolis.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we went on Google Maps and we pulled up the directions, and Google Maps gave us the directions for with toll roads and without toll roads. And my parents said, well, let's do the toll roads because we'll get there 7 minutes earlier. And it's like, okay, they're not going to get bored 2 minutes before we arrive and take down the lights. They're still going to be there.
There's nothing in Gallipolis that's worth 7 minutes.
I was going to say, for 7 minutes early.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't get that.
And Chris Hughes, that translate into City of the Gauls.
That's right.
It does. Yeah.
But so anyway, I apologized, and then we've had our announcer run a travel and tour and visit West Virginia ad for the past 2 or 3 weeks. But if you could tell me what your favorite part, what do you love most about West Virginia, and maybe we can dig us out of our hole that we've dug out in West Virginia.
My favorite things about West Virginia, first of all, the pepperoni rolls.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Number 2, I would have to say the Mothman, because my experience is when you go to the world outside of West Virginia, anybody who understands that you don't mean the western part of Virginia knows that West Virginia is a state because of Mothman. Like, that's the main thing that people know us for now. It's ever since I moved away from West Virginia, every mention of, so where are you from? I'm from West Virginia. Oh, I have family in Norfolk. I don't care.
I don't care. Yeah.
But if they know that West Virginia is its own thing, it immediately is followed by a question about Mothman. Were you anywhere near Mothman? Yeah, that's a couple miles down the road from me. So just for the fact that it gives a state an identity, I'm grateful for the Mothman. And the third thing that I'm very proud of is I love living in a state where we have erected a statue of Don Knotts.
I say this calls for action, and now, nip it in the bud. First sign of youngsters going wrong, you got to nip it in the bud.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Other states can have, you can have your Lincoln Memorial, you can have your Washington Monument. We have a statue of Don Knotts in character as Barney Fife.
Nice.
And I mean, that's a point of pride. Now, personally, I would have liked Don Knotts as, Mr. Furley. I would have liked a statue of, him posed with the bad toupee and the ascot and like with his ear pressed against a door and looking horrified. Yeah. But no. We had to go with Don Knotts in the deputy uniform. And it's okay. Well, that's not a hill we need to die on.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess.
In Morgantown, there's Don Knotts Boulevard. There's the whole street named after him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Huntington, we don't have anything. So Morgantown.
No. Huntington has Soupy Sales Boulevard.
Oh,
or is it just...
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Son of a bitch. Let's go to Huntington.
And we had Matthew McConaughey was there for a few weeks while they were filming We Are Marshall.
That was at the tail end of my time in college. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm gonna piss off West Virginia again. It's my turn to piss off West Virginia.
So,
when I went to go see We Are Marshall, I remember it starts out. It says on the whatever, there's Ohio River. On that river, there's a factory. Next to the factory, there's a school. Blah blah blah. It goes down to the what do you call that? The fountain. And zooms in on the fountain and talks about how it turns off for a period of time. I saw that movie when it came out, which is 2000 something?
I guess.
2006, 2007.
Yeah, I was way old enough to have heard about this story. I didn't know that story at all. Right. I grew up in that area. I saw the fountain. I had, and I'll say this without any embarrassment, rollerbladed around that fountain. I didn't know what the big deal. No one ever made a big deal about it. It was just a fountain.
I never knew you rollerbladed.
Yeah,
but just for a few weeks there back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's back up for a second and tell me a little more. I'm fascinated with the Mothman. What's the Mothman? I don't know.
You don't know the Mothman?
No, I don't know the Mothman.
Oh my God.
No, the Mothman is this creature with allegedly wings and glowing red eyes that appeared somewhere in West Virginia some years ago, and it's our bit of local lore. It's our cryptozoology. There's
the bridge. A bridge fell down. What was the bridge?
Okay.
I forget the name of the bridge.
Yeah. It's the mythology. Because here's the funny thing. I don't remember ever hearing about this when I was like a kid.
Right.
Like it was. I guess it happened in the 1960s.
Yeah.
In the Point Pleasant area, which is a bit south of me. I don't remember ever hearing about this until I was in college or so. Like, this was not on my radar, and now it's this thing that everybody talks about, and it's this famous bit of West Virginia lore and mythos, and this was not a thing that I thought about when I was a kid.
I was really big into cryptids.
It's the scary monster version of Elf on a Shelf. Everyone talks about how we all know it, and nobody ever mentioned it until much, much more recently.
I remember as a kid, I did read about it in a book. I loved the Loch Ness Monster.
I said, I ain't giving you no $3.50, you damn Loch Ness monster. Get your own damn money.
Yeah.
All the different monsters around. And then I saw there was one in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I got so excited, and I read it was Mothman. I remember as a kid being like, really? They got dinosaurs at Loch Ness. There's a dinosaur up in one of these lakes, and we get a moth guy, a guy in a moth suit flying around and talking about bridges falling down. But there's a movie with Richard Gere, The Mothman Prophecies.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah. That's what that's about.
When was the last time the Mothman was spotted?
Like 67, 68.
Okay. I'm wondering, and hear me out.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any chance that the Mothman and Don Knotts are the same person.
Okay.
Because he just, gets thrown into popularity, and I don't have time to be the Mothman anymore, and just maybe.
You've lost
now
every
I've pissed
listener
off
in
more.
West Virginia.
No, he was making Mr. Limpet, and he got sidetracked from his Mothman obligations.
Exactly, the incredible Mr. Limpet.
Beautiful landscapes, magnificent rivers and streams, exotic and awe-inspiring skies that fill your heart with joy. It's these images that trick your eyes into believing that you're traveling inside an actual Bob Ross painting. Hi, I'm Dave Lay, and I'm talking about West Virginia. The only thing more amazing than the scenery is the fine folks that call West Virginia their home. So take those vacation plans you have scheduled and throw them out the damn window. Schedule your next trip right now to West Virginia. Bask in the glow of luxury and charming Southern hospitality. Learn more at wvtourism.com.
Recently, you have put out a new book, Gong This Book, all about Chuck Barris and the history of the Gong Show. And I'm so happy that you did this because next to Press Your Luck and Remote Control on MTV, the Gong Show was one of my three favorite game shows. No, not one of the best game shows, but one of my favorites.
But it's interesting that you point that out because there's a weird phenomenon with this show that I've pointed out in my work with the museum that we're doing, which we can talk about later.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we've been having all these discussions about what counts as a game show, what doesn't count as a game show, and that's a necessary discussion to have as we've seen the subgenre, like Survivor and American Idol and things like that. What's a game show and what's not a game show?
Right.
And you referring to the Gong Show as a game show is one of the stranger things to me because that's the only one of those talent shows that TV has had over the years that people classify as a game show. And it's the one of the TV talent shows that is the least like a game show. Like, we give a free pass to the one that fits the genre the least. Star Search feels more like a game show to me than the Gong Show, but we call the Gong Show a game show, and we don't call Star Search a game show. But it was this amazing cultural phenomenon. As cultural phenomenons go, it was closer to fad status and relatively short-lived. It was 4 years, which is a respectable run for a TV show.
Yeah.
But comparing it to something like the run of a show like Seinfeld or Cheers or Happy Days, 4 years feels a little short for a show that had the impact that it had. But just an amazing show that, in hindsight, turned out to be very, very prescient with what television became in the 21st century, and quite a launching ground for new talent even though that wasn't exactly what they had in mind when they launched the show. The show came about because they were attempting to do something like Star Search, which was going to be, we want to do a talent show that's going to be the next big venue for new talent to be discovered. And the early auditions for the show were so bad that they reshaped the focus and they say, okay, forget about finding new stars. Now we're just going to make it a showcase of bad acts. We're just going to make it a showcase of, wow, these people are awful and they're willing to come on television and show off how bad they are at what they do. And despite that, they actually did end up launching careers. Paul Rubens, Phil Hartman, Mayor Winningham, Robert Schimmel, a lot of people got early breaks on the Gong Show, and it was very strange how that worked out because they were steering away from that when they first went on the air.
Yeah. Was that Chuck Barris's decision to do the bad acts, or was that somebody higher up than him?
That was a collaborative effort between Chuck and a man named Chris Beard. And Chris Beard is one of those guys who had his hands in every 60s and 70s variety show. If you go on IMDb, he, like the Sonny and Cher Hour or shows like that, somehow Chris Beard was always involved with those shows. Chris Beard suggested the idea at a hockey game. Chuck had told him, we tried to do this talent show. It didn't work out because all the acts were awful. And Chris Beard said, well, why don't you just make that the show? Make it a show about awful acts.
Yeah.
So it was a friend's idea, and they were briefly business partners, and that didn't go well because Chuck didn't like being the co-boss. Chuck liked being the boss. It was Chris Beard's idea, basically, for it to be this weird anti-talent show, but Chuck was the one that gave it, I guess you would say, the flavor.
Oh, it was fascinating. What would you say? I mean, you know everything. What did you discover that you didn't already know about Chuck Barris or the show?
What I discovered that I didn't already know about the show, I learned a lot about the audition process, which was amazing because everybody who auditioned for the show that I reached out to, let me backtrack and explain this process. ABC did a revival of the Gong Show back in 2017, which was the nucleus of this project. They had me binge watch all of the episodes of the Gong Show that had gotten out of the vault, basically, which was about 400 episodes. Okay. And they had me watch it, and they gave me this assignment: look for the contact information of as many contestants as you could find and track them down, because one of the ideas they had was they were considering doing a Gong Show alumni night on ABC.
It's like a job for a bounty hunter.
Yeah, that ended up never happening, but I amassed this huge list of people who had been contestants on the Gong Show. And then a publisher reached out to me and asked, would you write a book about the history of the Gong Show? So I said, great. So rather than using this for this ABC alumni special that got called off, I ended up contacting these people to let them know that I was writing a book about the Gong Show, and would you please tell me your memories? And everybody had the same memories of it, which was, you came to a condemned restaurant in downtown Los Angeles for the auditions. That was, you didn't come to a studio. You didn't come to Chuck Barris's office. They rented out a condemned restaurant in Los Angeles. One of them gave a very picturesque description of it. She said, if you've ever seen the movie Godfather, it looked like the restaurant where Michael had to get the gun from behind the gun.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's basically where you had to audition for the Gong Show. And it was a staff of 3 guys that Chuck called the shock troops, because they saw everything. And the amazing statistic that I'll carry around for the rest of my life was, for every 1 act that got on the Gong Show, 9 were rejected. So the next time that you watch a Gong Show episode, just go on YouTube. They usually had 7 acts per episode.
Okay.
And you do the math in your head, and what I want you to think about watching that episode is 63 acts were worse than what you're seeing on this episode. That is a stat that will stay with you forever. So they did these auditions. Anybody that they thought merited being on the show, whether it was because, oh my God, they're amazingly good, or oh my God, they're amazingly bad, they would come back. And the thing that all the contestants remembered was they expressed surprise at how involved Chuck was in the audition process. Because when you came back for the second audition, you were auditioning for Chuck. And Chuck would talk to you, and Chuck would ask you questions about your act and ask you, about this part of your act, about this part of your act, and then book you on the show. And then when you showed up for taping that day, it was Chuck running the rehearsal. Chuck was not in his office or sitting in his dressing room waiting to go on. Chuck was out there for about 3 hours before every taping started, and just walking every act through their performance and what they were going to do, and letting them know, okay, just so you know, here's where the lights are going to be, here's where the cameras are going to be, we just want you to do this, don't worry. And there's a really neat piece of footage. It's about 2 hours worth of Gong Show rehearsal footage from a taping, and I was able to get my hands on that and study that. And what's great about it is you can see how warmly Chuck receives the contestants and how much he cares about them. He wants them to know. At one point, they have to do something over because the audio wasn't right. And Chuck just assures these people over and over again, everything you're doing is right. You don't have to change anything. We're the ones who are doing it over because we need to fix our equipment. And he's very, very assuring to them. And he's very, very in their corner. And a lot of the contestants remembered just feeling very, very safe and very, very warm in his presence. And Chuck had kind of this reputation in the press. The press thought, Chuck brings these contestants on the show to make fools of them and to make fun of them, and he thought they were idiots. And no, Chuck really revered his contestants and respected them. And what he said over and over again was he respects his contestants because they're willing to go on TV and do this. Even Chuck conceded, if you watch the acts on the Gong Show, I wouldn't go on national TV and do this stuff. Like, he really admired the contestants on his shows because they were willing to put themselves out there.
Well,
and
yeah,
he
I think
really saw it.
You got to be brave to do that.
He saw it as a display of courage, and he admired his contestants. So putting these people on the show really was a matter of him befriending each of them and reassuring them and just being in their corner from start to finish of the taping. So that was the part of the process that really surprised me, was just learning how involved he was and how devoted he was to this show. All of the staff remembered, because Chuck had an empire at this point. You have to remember, it wasn't just the Gong Show. He had the dating game, he had the newlywed game, he had the new treasure hunt. Chuck had this whole empire. And then the Gong Show came along and became a hit, and everybody remembered that Chuck kind of turned over the keys to his other shows once the Gong Show became popular, and he would devote 12-hour days to the Gong Show after that. Just coming up with material for short little skits that they would do between the acts, the audition process, and all of that stuff. Chuck would work these incredibly long days and just devoted his whole life to the Gong Show for about 4 years.
Well, because outside looking in, it's a dumb guy like me, it just looks like they rolled camera. Chuck came out drunk, and then whatever happened. It didn't look polished,
Yeah,
it looked like they were winging it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of hard work to make something look that bad. They did work incredibly hard on it. And to your point about drunk, here was the other surprising thing. When you hear something from enough people, the first time you hear it, you don't believe it. But when you talk to enough people who were there and who were around it, you do start to believe it. And everybody agreed on the same experience talking about Chuck Barris. And I mean, I'm talking about Chuck's employees. I interviewed the people who worked for him. Chuck was not just anti-drug and anti-alcohol. He was intensely, virulently anti-drug, anti-alcohol, to the point that the example one of them gave was there was a day where somebody got caught using marijuana around the office.
Yeah.
And Chuck dragged him into the office in front of everybody and announced, "This guy is our hostage now." And they said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "If anybody else is using marijuana around here, he gets fired."
Oh.
They said, you have to understand the reason for that was there was so much negative press around Chuck all the time because the TV critics and the entertainment press generally just hated his shows, not just the Gong Show. They hated the Newlywed Game. They hated the Dating Game. They hated everything Chuck did.
Those are great shows.
And because there was so much negative attention on Chuck, he basically said the last thing we need is drug issues because that's going to get out. There was that element about it, but the other element was it is the TV business, and it's the 1970s. He was anti-drug, but it was also more of a matter of, I don't want to know about it. And the gentleman who was the main question writer for the Newlywed Game and the Dating Game talked about the creative process of the show, and he said, here's the creative process of the show. The writers would all get up and go to the apartment of the person that lived nearest to Chuck's office. They would partake in some substances where Chuck could not see or hear them.
Yeah.
And then they would go back to the office and write questions now that they had the right amount of assistants in there. But nice. He said that was the thing. There was drug use in Chuck Barris's production company, but they had to hide it from Chuck, and Chuck himself was not on anything. And it's the hardest, and I'm not going to argue with any comments that I see on the internet that say, man, you can tell this guy is so high on this show. He wasn't. They said that's the thing, is the way Chuck acted was just the way he was. Yeah, that was just the man's vibe.
So is he he's the guy that the CIA killer thing? That's the
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
So idiots like me and Adam will find your book in the store and look in the contents or somewhere for CIA Assassin's Creed, Mortal Kombat, something. Do you touch on that at all, or
we do touch on that. The only thing I'm going to say, I go into greater detail in the book, but I'll say one thing leading up to it, which is this is a guy who wrote a book about how he was a secret assassin for the CIA, where he outlined the missions that he went on and the names of the other spies he associated with, the nature of his missions, and who he killed on those missions.
Yeah. Something, yeah.
And that book got published without anybody from the CIA trying to stop it. And I think that's enough information for you to come to a judgment about whether or not he was a CIA assassin. Yeah. He maintained for years and years and years, I'm not going to tell for real if it really happened or not. But he gave kind of a one soul bearing interview where he admitted that this was writing that book and making that claim was the result of him just having a total mental break at the end of the Gong Show, where it was just him processing, oh my God, people hate the stuff that I did on television, and just trying to cope with the way that other people felt about him.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Was it a hit?
The book was a hit, and pretty much almost everything Chuck did was a hit. There were a few scattered flops here and there with classically awful titles. That's the great thing. Everything Chuck did that failed had an amazing title. So, Operation Entertainment, How's Your Mother-in-Law, The Chuck Barris Rah Rah Show. Basically, the more memorable the title was, the worse it did for Chuck.
I want to watch How's Your Mother-in-Law.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great show.
From Hollywood, USA, How's Your Mother-in-Law?
No, it was How's Your Mother-in-Law? And again, it was one of those shows that you can't say it was released, it escaped. It was a show that Chuck did in 1967, hosted by Wink Martindale. And the premise was 3 elderly women who were all mothers-in-law. Each of them was represented by a comedian who was playing the role of their attorney. And the comedian would speak on their behalf and advocate for them and swear that they were actually a good mother-in-law and not the stereotypical ultra-hateable mother-in-law. And the one that the jury, the audience, voted for as the best mother-in-law won $100 at the end of the half hour.
$100.
Yeah, that's... Well.
I mean, $100 was a lot of money back in the day.
And it failed in 13 weeks, and Chuck said, reflecting on it afterwards, even if it's a mother-in-law, it's still somebody's mother. And basically we did a TV show where 3 mothers get ripped new ones.
Yeah.
And it's like, does anybody want to watch that? And he realized far too late, no, nobody wants to watch this.
Now, is that available anywhere where we could see it?
There's like one surviving episode and a publicity photo, which shows George Carlin is one of the defense attorneys on the show.
I got to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was a struggling actor, because I worked for Antenna TV, and I was going through episodes of That Girl, and with Marlo Thomas, and George Carlin played her agent, I believe. Because I was watching, he was so young. It took me a few minutes to figure out. I was like, wait a minute, that's George Carlin.
Yeah, because if you watch How's Your Mother-in-Law, that's the version of George Carlin you're getting. The one with the short hair and the clean shaven, where you kind of have to piece together that it's George Carlin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This portion of Irritable Dad Syndrome is brought to you by Whoppers all-beef foot-long hot dogs. Whoppers are packed full of flavor and guarantee to be a hit at your next tailgate party. Get a ruler and measure it yourself. If your hot dog isn't a foot long, we'll refund your money guaranteed. So what are you waiting for? Get a family pack of Whoppers today. You'll be glad you did. Now back to Mike and Larry. Warning, this portion of Irritable Dad Syndrome contains sensitive material and is for mature audiences only.
We've got a question from one of our listeners. Is it true the Popsicle Twins was the last straw and led to the cancellation, or was it J.P. Morgan flashing her boobs?
No, here's the funny thing. Neither one of those, because I asked about this, and the Popsicle Twins, I should contextualize this because I never want to make the mistake of assuming that the audience knows what we know, so I should explain what the Popsicle Twins were.
Yes,
and
please.
if you folks out there don't know what the Popsicle Twins are, turn up your volume. You need to hear this because this really happened. Chuck Barris had this quirky little trick that he figured out in dealing with the censors at NBC. And he said what he figured out was the NBC censors would always insist on approving every act that Chuck wanted to book for the show. And Chuck noticed this pattern where when they were getting ready for every taping and they would show the acts, the NBC censors would always say no to exactly one act. And it was never more, and it was never zero. They never approved everybody, but there was never 2 or more acts. They would always reject exactly 1 act. So once Chuck figured out that pattern, what he would do was, when he had acts that were borderline, that he wasn't sure he could slip past the censors, he would ask his talent people to book 1 act that did something just wildly inappropriate and offensive that clearly was not suited to air on television.
Okay.
And so what happened was the NBC censors would see this act that definitely was beyond the pale that you could not do on network television in 1977. And they would say, nope, you can't do that. And the borderline acts that Chuck wasn't sure about could go on the air after that because they had rejected their 1 act. So that was the trick.
Okay.
The Popsicle Twins, the official name of the act was Have You Got a Nickel, but everybody who knows their Gong Show history calls them the Popsicle Twins. The Popsicle Twins were these 2 very young girls, they appear to be teenagers, who came out on stage in short shorts with a pair of popsicles, and their entire act was they sucked on the popsicles for 1.5 minutes.
Okay.
And
Hello.
theater of the mind, I have to explain that when I say they sucked on popsicles for 1.5 minutes, they did it in the worst way you could possibly do it for a family viewing audience in 1977.
Okay.
So that's what the Popsicle Twins did. And so for years and years, the rumor was that this is one of the things that got the Gong Show canceled. And I was looking at the timeline of events, and that didn't make sense to me because they were on the air 10 months before the Gong Show got canceled. What happened was the Popsicle Twins aired on the East Coast.
Hey, what happened?
Some fits were thrown at NBC, and it got pulled from the West Coast. They got alerts from the NBC affiliates in the East Coast that, whoa, you let something not okay go on the air just now. Now, I'll give you an exclusive thing that's not in the book, and the reason it's not in the book was because I didn't hear this story until the book was going to press, but one of Chuck's staffers told me this after it was too late to put it in the book. So here's an exclusive
exclusive.
bit.
Here we go.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, kids.
So this staffer from Chuck Barris Productions told me, he said, here's what we were told at the office. He said, the big problem with this act, as we understood it, was one of these women, one of these young girls, was the daughter of a senator in an East Coast state.
Okay.
And they said what they had heard was a senator's office called NBC and said, get this off the air right now. That's my daughter. NBC hastily called their West Coast affiliates and said, do not air the Gong Show today. Allegedly, one of them is the daughter of a senator and her friend. But that was the other trick, was we couldn't find their identity. The Gong Show had rundown sheets for each of their tapings, which had, and this was amazingly helpful, the rundown sheets had a list of the acts, the names of the acts, the technical specs for the acts, and the real names of the acts, which was great for research for me. But of all the bad luck you could possibly have, I swear this is true, we could not find the rundown sheet from that day's taping.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we don't have their names here, and none of the staffers that I interviewed could remember their names. The only one who did was Larry Spencer, who was Chuck's joke writer. And I said, do you remember anything about them? Do you remember their names? And he thinks about it, and he says, I remember I tried to ask one of them out before they left the studio.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Shoot your shot. You know, you miss 100% of the shots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You only live one life. Yeah. So who are the most notable celebrities, not contestants, but they had 3 celebrity guests each time?
Yeah. The celebrity judges, and it was a mix of celebrities that got more eclectic as the show went on, because more and more often celebrities would do the show once and then realize, oh, I don't want to be any part of this. Right. So if you watch like the first 13 weeks of the Gong Show, it's people that you saw on game shows in that era, like Fannie Flagg and Joanne Worley and Joyce Bulifant. And what would happen is they would do one taping of the show. They'd be absolutely mortified by what they were just a part of, and then they never came back again. So the biggest stars that I would say on the panel, there was J.P. Morgan, who everyone remembers from being on the panel, to the point of people don't remember that she was actually a bona fide celebrity before the Gong Show. She was a prolific singer and a very well-known singer.
I always wondered what she did, yeah.
Yeah. A very talented singer and very, very entertaining. And one of the funny things that I learned, again, from Chuck's staff, because it was an NBC show, the Gong Show was on NBC daytime. I was talking to Chuck's staff, and one of them said, you know, Johnny Carson really hated the fact that we were in his studio complex. He hated that we had to share studio space with him. And I said, oh, why? Because he thought the Gong Show was beneath his dignity. He thought that the Gong Show was it was so tasteless and beyond. And they said, no. The problem Johnny had with the Gong Show was that when we first went into production, he had just broken it off with J.P. Morgan.
Oh.
And so we signed her to be a regular judge.
Wait.
So Johnny...
Wait. I'm sorry. Johnny Carson and J.P. Morgan.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
I guess I've only seen pictures of the older J.P. Morgan.
Yeah. So Johnny had to share studio space with his ex-mistress every week, and he hated that. That drove him up a wall that they did that to him. Jamie Farr, who I got a chance to interview, who's a wonderful guy.
Huh.
I loved interviewing him, and I loved getting to know him. And Jamie was not bothered in the least by the Gong Show. He didn't name a name, but he said somebody at MASH said, you really shouldn't be doing this show. And he said, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And Jamie also made a point that would never have occurred to me, but I kind of learned one lesson in the past few years about why celebrities did game shows. And Jamie said this absolutely applies, and this is why he did the Gong Show. Jamie is a member of the Actors Union. It's now SAG-AFTRA. He was a member of it when it was just, I think he was just AFTRA, one or the other. Your pension when you're a member of AFTRA is determined by the amount of work you do, just the sheer amount of it, not what time slot it is, not how popular the show is, just the amount of it.
It's quantity,
and Jamie Farr
not
told
quality.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jamie Farr said basically he did the Gong Show and other game shows so much that he maxed out the pension plan. Jamie Farr is now collecting the maximum amount that you're allowed to collect as an actor under the pension plan. And people assume that it's because MASH was so popular. He says, no, it wasn't because MASH was popular. It was because I did the Gong Show so much.
Yeah.
It was... So, yeah, that's one of the reasons that, and I found this out from somebody else on the show too, was every now and then you'll see an oddball case of an actor who doesn't do game shows that much suddenly appearing on a game show.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out from one of the people who was involved with talent booking that what would happen very often was somebody's union membership was about to roll over and your health plan was based on the amount of work that you did for the year. So they would call up the talent department and say, listen, he needs 2 more hours of work this year in order to qualify for this level of healthcare plan. So can you just come in and do 5 episodes of your game show? And so you'd have people come in and do game shows just to get the health plan.
So that's why we saw Sir Laurence Olivier. Okay.
No, there's I'm positive I can give you a perfect example of this. There's a weird week of Match Game where Raymond Burr is on the panel. And you sit there and stare at him the whole time because you can tell even the other celebrities are like, what the hell is Raymond Burr doing here?
Raymond Burr.
And he is, and
he's got to have some dental work done.
He is, Raymond Burr is transparently not enjoying himself through this entire week, but he's doing a week of Match Game. And I look on that now and I'm like, okay, that had to be a healthcare plan thing.
Yeah. So who else? I mean, was Richard Dawson and Charles Nelson Riley also on there? Because you'd think with those two on there that they would have fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No. Raymond Burr was on there after Richard. He was actually in Richard's seat.
Okay.
This was after Richard had quit, but Charles was there.
Okay.
So there's your little insight about why celebrities do game shows, or one of the reasons. Some of them do genuinely enjoy it. Jamie Farr. I have a feeling Jamie Farr would have done the Gong Show just as much, even if there was no pension plan involved there. He clearly had the time of his life, and it just came through in all the stories that he told.
Yeah.
Just his insights about how they took care of the celebrities. One of the fun little details that I learned from Jamie Farr was after a Gong Show taping was over, they would rip your name off the dressing room door, but also hide you in your dressing room for about 20 minutes. So that way, any contestants that you gonged were safely and definitely out of the building by the time you left.
Letterman was on the Gong Show, wasn't he?
Letterman was on the Gong Show, yeah. When he was an up-and-coming comic, when he was a stand-up, and very early on, somebody at NBC was very high on him. And I have a feeling that Alan Ludden, the host of Password, did the Gong Show a lot too, surprisingly often. And seeing Alan Ludden on Password was a little like seeing Walter Cronkite doing the show. But Alan Ludden did the Gong Show occasionally, and suddenly you also saw David Letterman on the show. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that had to do with Alan Ludden, but David Letterman did about a week on the show. He's the David Letterman that you know, which makes him a strange fit for the Gong Show.
Yeah,
because, for example, Gene the Dancing Machine comes out and does his thing. And the 2 other judges get up and dance along with Gene, and Dave just stays at the judges panel and claps his hands rhythmically.
Yeah.
And he's making a show of, okay, I'm going to participate in this.
But I'm not going to like it.
I'm not dancing.
Yeah. No, I remember because he talked to Paul one night about how he used to do the pyramid, and I know he did Password, but he was talking about how they never won the big money.
Yeah.
And I used to have Game Show Network. I don't think I have it anymore unless it's on Pluto. The only time that they would do a week of celebrities, they would show the same one with David Letterman and Marion Ross.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, how many episodes do you have with Letterman as a guest?
David Letterman, he did a week of Password Plus, and that was the funny thing is, now that you're mentioning it, that week of Password Plus is the only time that I know of that he won a bonus round. He's right about that.
Yeah.
But he was always really sharp as a tack in the main part of the game.
I thought so too, yeah.
And Pyramid was the same story. David Letterman would always play the main game of Pyramid very well, but he would always falter in the winner's circle. So you would always have this parade of people winning a couple $100 whenever David Letterman did a week of Pyramid. Yeah. One of my favorite episodes of Pyramid is David Letterman as a guest. First of all, this is back when they taped it in New York, and Dave comes out on stage wearing a Dodgers jersey. So the audience is booing as the celebrity guests are introduced, which I'm sure is the entire reason he wore the jacket. Yeah. God bless him. But the other thing I remember about this week of Pyramid was Dick Clark comes out and he has kind of a smirk on his face and he says, Dave, before we begin the show, the production staff wanted to ask me if the hotel situation got resolved. And Dave chuckles and says, yes, it's been resolved. And Dick explains, so Dave is coming in from out of town to do the show. He lives in Los Angeles. We're taping in New York. So we agreed to make hotel accommodations for him if he would come in and do the show for a week. So we booked you in a hotel here in New York. And you called us a few hours ago and said, I can't stay in this hotel. And he said, Dave, would you care to tell America what the problem was with the hotel? And Dave looks in the camera and says, no bathroom.
Wow.
Okay. They had booked him basically in an hourly rate hotel. Being a guest on
okay.
Wow.
But yeah, Dave was talking one night about how he would he would just get drunk as can possibly be and do the show. And he felt bad that nobody ever won. But then, but yeah, I wish I could find some other episodes besides the Password one. And I think the episode of the Gong Show, but I believe Steve Martin was on the Gong Show also, but I don't know that it was the same night that Letterman was on.
No, a different couple of weeks. And this is one of those, there's a mistake on the internet. Steve Martin is often in like clickbait sites. You'll see it mentioned that, Steve Martin was on the Gong Show before he became famous or something. And no, Steve was actually a pretty big star in the realm of stand-up in 1977 to the point that they actually billboarded him. Chuck announced Steve Martin is going to be a judge on our show next week, which he never did with any other judge.
Yeah.
So they were making a big deal out of the fact that Steve Martin was going to be on the show. The thing that Steve Martin did that was memorable was they did an episode where all of the acts got gonged. It just worked out they had that many bad acts in one episode. And the problem with the Gong Show that they ran into very often was, even though that was the show's identity, it did havoc on the show whenever acts got gonged. A lot of acts got gonged because you have 7 or 8 acts that have been booked for 90 seconds apiece. And if 2 of those acts get gonged, that leaves you with about a minute and a half to 2 minutes to fill now in a 30-minute show.
And that's a lot of Gene the Dancing Machine.
Right. So basically they had this massive hole of television remaining after all the acts have been gonged. So Chuck announces, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great banjo. And it's Steve Martin, and they're pretending Steve Martin is a contestant and he's playing the banjo. Uh-huh. And it's straight up filler material. He's out there to kill time.
Yeah.
But they pretended Steve Martin was a contestant for a few minutes just because they had used up all their contestants for the day on this episode of the Gong Show.
You're listening to Irritable Dad Syndrome, Cincinnati's comedy podcast.
You two are just dumber than a bag of hammers.
Yeah, it's an era that we're never going to see again. I know you had mentioned that they tried to reboot it, and I can't remember the year, but was that the one with Dave Attell?
There were a couple of attempts to reboot it. They did a version in 1988 hosted by a man named True Don Blue, who's a very popular disc jockey up in the San Francisco area, I believe. Don Blue hosted it for one season, and Chuck had sold his company by that point and was pretty well disconnected from it. And it's really funny. That was the first time that America saw the lesson that should have been learned forever with the Gong Show, which is everything that people loved about that show had to do with Chuck.
Yeah.
It was Chuck putting the flavor into it. It was Chuck giving it his sensibility. It was Chuck giving it its sense of style. And when Chuck wasn't there, even if you call it the Gong Show, and even if it's 3 judges banging a gong on zany acts that they don't like, it doesn't feel like the Gong Show when Chuck's not around. That was his show. So they tried it with Don Bluth. Game Show Network tried a revival called Extreme Gong with George Gray, where the premise was, instead of celebrity judges, they had an 800 number at the bottom of the screen. And if you didn't like the act, you called the phone number. And if they got enough phone calls, they would gong the act.
Oh, wow.
And then Dave Attell did it for a very brief period on Comedy Central. They shot a pilot hosted by Tom Arnold in the 2000s, and I think that was going to be for the WB.
Yeah.
And then Mike Myers did it for 2 seasons on ABC.
Yeah.
And I rather enjoyed the Mike Myers version. I really did.
Was that Mike Myers as the... He played
as the stuffy British guy. They had Mike Myers, but they weren't acknowledging it was Mike Myers. It was him wearing heavy set old person makeup, and he was playing the role of like a legendary British TV presenter hosting the Gong Show. But as much as I liked it, again, that goes back to it doesn't feel like the Gong Show if Chuck's not there.
Yeah.
He was so much a part of that show and so much the fabric of it, and it was his identity and it was his fingerprints all over it, that without Chuck, it's just, you can call it the Gong Show, but it's not the Gong Show anymore.
So you went on a big fancy network, the ABC, as it were, on the Game Show show. So how awesome was that?
I loved it. That was a real treat, and it was a lot of fun. It was a perfect excuse to wear makeup for a while.
You don't need an excuse to do that.
No, I got cold called by these folks who had made a very good documentary for CNN about the history of late night talk shows, and I loved that. And I thought that had been very well done. And they brought me in for about 3 days and just had me sit in front of this camera and rattle off everything that I knew about game shows. And it was just so much fun being able to do that and being able to speak to something that I'm passionate about, something that I'm interested in, and collect a paycheck for just doing what I do to bore people at parties. That was really, it was really gratifying, and it was really a lot of fun. It was called The Game Show Show, if anyone wishes to dig it up on Hulu.
Yeah, it was really good. You know, CNN did the history of late night. And then I know everybody on the Letterman fan page was talking about, hey, they skipped over this and they barely mentioned this, and there was hardly any mention of Pat Sajak or Chevy Chase or whatever. What did they not talk about on the Game Show show?
I remember we did a deep dive on the history of What's My Line, and then we didn't use any of that. I understand on one hand, but it kind of speaks to my frustration with the format they went with. I didn't have a say in the format, and I'm not saying that I was disappointed by the finished project. But I would love somebody to take a chance on doing a linear history of game shows. I wrote a book called Game Shows FAQ that basically attempts to do that. Do a first A happened, then B happened, then C happened history of game shows, just to kind of show you how things started, how things ended up this way, and how we changed from doing it this way to doing it this way. I think justice could be done to the story of game shows over the past 100 years if somebody wanted to take the chance on that.
There was something that you put on Facebook today that you were going to the Quiz Show Expo.
The Quiz Show Expo. Yeah. That's going to be in beautiful downtown Burbank near the Bob Hope Airport. That's going to be happening the weekend of June 1st. I will be autographing copies of my book. It's being organized by a gentleman named Tony Pinizzato, who is one of the people behind the Buzzer channel. If you have Buzzer in your neck of the woods, he's one of the people that runs that channel. Game show junkie just like me. Game show junkie who managed to turn it into a living just like I did. But the plan for the weekend is lots of games, lots of keynote guests, panels, probably organizing some bus trips to the game shows that are going to be taping on Sunday of that weekend. Yeah, I'm going to be there signing autographed copies of my books, and I was going to say posing for photos. I'm not at the point. I am not at the point in my life yet where I'm comfortable saying anybody wants to take a photo of me. That's the part of this that feels weird. It's probably going to happen, but I'm like, Wink Martindale is over there. Why don't you get a? Yeah. You don't need a. Listen, I talked you into buying a book I wrote. I feel like I'm the one pressuring you to take a photo of me. Why don't you go over to...
Well, we went to a Lego thing one time, and there were 4 or 5 professional Lego builders, and there were people in line ready, just chomping at the bit to pay to have their picture taken with these Lego builders. And it just goes to show there are people who know you and you're a likable guy. I can totally see people wanting to meet and greet you. Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, we went to the World's Fair, and there was a Pac-Man store, and they had a guy in a Pac-Man suit that could barely stand, just two legs coming out of the bottom of a Pac-Man.
I don't know that's a real Pac-Man.
I ran. Well, as a kid, I'm posing for the picture. I'm excited, and then I'm thinking about it, and I don't think that was the real Pac-Man. I think it was just a guy.
And the funny thing is realizing that every subculture, every interest has legendary names who nobody outside of this field of interest knows who these people are. I ended up following an Instagram account just because I thought, this sounds interesting. But it was an Instagram account devoted to Viewmaster artwork. If you had a Viewmaster when you were a kid. And so it's like a clay figure of Fred Flintstone sitting in his easy chair watching TV. And it's like, here's from a Viewmaster release in 1964. Here's a clay sculpture of Fred Flintstone done by the legendary Harlan Stevenson. Yeah. And everybody, all the comments are like, oh my God, that's a Harlan Stevenson figure. Harlan Stevenson. Like, this is a celebrity to people who know about the people that crafted the model figures for Viewmasters.
There's one more thing I want to ask you about, and that's the Strong National Museum of Play.
Oh, God bless you. Yes.
God love you, because I remember you first posted about this, and you were about to lose your mind. And this looks fascinating to me, and I like game shows. I've used to watch them all the time when I was a kid. I'm not a mega fan, but I would totally go to this. Just because, I worked in television for the past 31 years.
Yeah, the National Archives of Game Show History, co-founded by two industry legends who have become good friends. Howard Blumenthal, who was involved in the development of MTV's Remote Control and was also involved in the development of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego for PBS. And his father was the producer and the puzzle artist for the original version of Concentration for 14 years.
Yeah.
And the other is Bob Bowden, wonderful man who he's been a boss of mine on a few shows that I've worked on, and has had a long career as both a network executive and as a producer of game shows. They organized this idea a few years ago with the Strong Museum of Play. And what the Strong Museum of Play is, just to contextualize it, it's a museum dedicated to play and all forms of that word. So there's a section of the museum dedicated to model trains. There's a section of the museum dedicated to dolls. There's a wing of the museum dedicated to video games. There's a wing of the museum dedicated to superheroes. There's a wing of the museum dedicated to fairy tale characters.
Oh, man.
It's just, it's all things that children play with and play about. And so the idea came up initially when Howard visited the museum, and it grew from there to have a wing of the museum dedicated to the history of game shows. This has turned into a wonderful project, not just for me, who's a game show junkie, but as we've begun reaching out to retired industry people from the game show world. What we've learned is that everybody who worked in game shows for many, many decades has one thing in common. All of them have a wife who has been begging them to clean out their basement for years. And so we're reaching out to them and asking, hey, we want exhibits for this museum. Did you save stuff from the shows you worked on? Did we? And just people are coming out of the woodwork with set pieces and with memos that they didn't throw away and with used game material and some of the goodies that we've gotten so far. We've gotten some of the goodies, some of the pricing games that The Price is Right doesn't play anymore. We've gotten set pieces from Card Sharks and The Weakest Link. We've gotten some of the used graphics that game shows aren't using anymore. We've got the giant decks of cards from Card Sharks and Gambit. We're amassing this huge collection of stuff, and it was all stuff that was just sitting in people's basements for years and years and years. And now finally somebody came and said, we want to establish this thing where we're going to preserve all of this stuff and put it in a safe place.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's going to be curated and it's going to be cared for and it's going to be on display.
Yeah.
We have essentially the entire original set of Family Feud in storage now.
And wow.
If you can picture what Family Feud used to look like, the giant board of what looked like lights, or it looked like something that you would see in an airport, with the readout of the answers and the number of people who said them for the Fast Money round.
Yeah.
We got that donated to us along with the rest of the original Family Feud set.
Wow.
And the son of the guy who built the original board came out to Rochester, New York to service it and set it up so that it could be run on a modern computer. So we can set this thing up to play new games of Family Feud now.
That's so awesome.
Wow.
I'm 53. When I was a kid, if you're, over the summer or if you're homesick or on winter break, I mean, that's what we did. We watched game shows during the day.
Yeah.
And they were great. You didn't have to put a lot of thought into it. It was just awesome. And it was just a piece of time that we're just not going to get back. And I missed that time when it was just game shows all throughout the day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The funny thing is we do kind of have that now, but it's just the big thing we've lost is kind of that. And there are good things and bad things about this, that uniform nature to entertainment that existed for many, many years, where you had 3 channels of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to watch game shows all day today in 2024, you can do that. CBS has an hour of Let's Make a Deal and an hour of The Price is Right every morning. And then in the afternoon, there's a batch of syndicated game shows, Pictionary, 25 Words or Less, Funny You Should Ask, Person, Place, or Thing. A kid today could watch game shows, but what's changed is the number of options. We're never going to have that era that we had in the past where everybody was watching the same shows. The
talk
choices
about
of
it the next
so
day.
limited. It's crazy to see the ratings data for shows that failed in the past, because now a failed show from 1975, they would throw a parade if that show got the same ratings today that it got when it was canceled in 1975.
Yeah.
It's we're talking about an era where 10 million viewers was a bomb. And 10 million viewers now means you are a smash hit in prime time, and nobody else is even close. And again, there are good parts to the fact that entertainment has split off so much. It is nice that there's something for everyone. It is nice that there are subcultures, so you can really find something that is very specifically tailored to your interest. But we have kind of lost that common culture where everybody is watching the same things, and you can all speak that same language where you're talking about what you saw on television last night or what movie you went to.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like, and I'm probably wrong, I'm usually wrong, it seems like anymore they grab stand-up comedians or actors who have already, done something, accomplished some sort of fame, and then they put them on a show. Who is like the last real true game show host that's just became famous for a game show?
I would say it has to be Pat Sajak, who we're saying goodbye to in May.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, we're still getting a connection. This is a guy who I don't think gets enough credit. We're getting Ryan Seacrest in place of him.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan Seacrest gets a lot of crap for some reason, but Ryan Seacrest is basically 21st century Dick Clark.
Yeah.
Where Dick Clark, you can't zero in on anything about Dick Clark, but Dick Clark was this warm, inviting presence who welcomed you into your home, who you welcomed in your home, and then he directed your attention to the entertainment for the evening. He was the master of ceremonies.
Yeah.
So it was just that quality where you weren't watching to see Dick Clark entertain you. You were watching because you liked Dick Clark, and Dick Clark was going to be your guide through whatever it was that you were going to enjoy tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Ryan Seacrest. Ryan Seacrest is our Dick Clark in the 21st century, and I don't know why people bristle at that, but he is a classic broadcaster in that mold. He got his start in radio, very attuned to live broadcasting, and very adept at it and very skilled at it, in an era where that's gone away because so little of TV is live, and it's so easy to do editing now.
That's right.
Ryan Seacrest is our great broadcaster in the 21st century.
Well, yeah, he had that. He had those qualities on American Idol. You never really knew which Ryan you were going to get when the contestants came off of the, or I don't want to say contestants, when the people would come out of the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would be upset, sometimes they would be happy or whatever, and you never really could tell whether he was going to, be overly nice to them, somber, actually make fun of them a couple of times, but generally speaking, he kind of smoothed things over, and he became kind of a figurehead of the show along with Simon and the rest of them.
Well,
and I think he's going to do a great job in the role of Wheel of Fortune host. Yeah, I think that's perfect for him.
I'm sure he will. And I genuinely like Ryan Seacrest. I have no problem with Ryan Seacrest. My only thing is, I just feel like there's so many other people who would have done a great job. And Ryan already has, 3 other jobs?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's come up. And a few people have sort of voiced this, and I'm not going to name a name because I don't want to cause trouble for anybody. But a few people have voiced the point that if you're in a pitch meeting, one of the things you hear in pitch meetings when you float an idea for a potential host is you'll hear things like, how many Instagram followers do they have? The modern buyers really do want people who have followings. And so you have to look for people who have some kind of history, some sort of claim to fame already. You don't have that generation of professional game show hosts that we used to have, and the buyers aren't really interested in cultivating that. It's more about, here's a name, here's a brand that we can attach to the show now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, because, if you would ask me who should host Wheel of Fortune, Bobcat Goldthwait.
I was going to say Andrew Dice Clay.
Dice would have been good too,
Yeah. Bobcat Goldthwait, who's had the strangest afterlife of a comedian, where he became the director of Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Yeah.
Which was I heard him talk about this on a podcast once, where he would be listening to somebody booking the talent for an upcoming segment of Jimmy Kimmel Live. And they'll say, okay, so you'll come in about 2 hours before taping starts, and you're going to talk to our director, Bob Goldthwait, and he's going to go through the... What? Yeah. No, it's the same guy. It's the same guy.
It's the same guy. Yeah.
There's a Bobcat moment that stuck out to me, and I did find it on YouTube again. You can find this. In one of his shows or one of his appearances, he did an impression of Bono.
Yes.
Singing With or Without You.
Yeah.
And he actually did a really good job.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's more, I mean, for one thing, it's, he was still in the Tasmanian thing. And then all of a sudden he's being Bono. He does a really good job at it. But outside of that, it's interesting listening to the audience watch him because they're laughing a little bit at first. They don't know whether to laugh or what's going on. And then they see that he's really good. And then every once in a while, there'll be a little bit of laughter or some confused clapping. And he's not really breaking character. He's just staying with it the entire time.
Well, he falls into that.
It was like an Andy Kaufman moment. It was like nobody knows what the hell to do at this point.
He falls into that category of, and by the way, Adam, I'm sorry we hijacked this and went into Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah.
He falls into that category.
How like life.
He falls into the category of the unique celebrity who does one impression.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, it was a thrill to have you. Thank you again for coming back.
Absolutely.
Tell everybody where they can go to get your new book and where they can go to get because you've got, a dozen other books that are all really good too.
11 books out. You can buy most of them from the publisher at Bear Manor Media, BEAR Manor, MANOR. media.com. You can also get them from Amazon, or you can get them from Barnes & Noble. Those are probably the 3 greatest websites to purchase my books from. Although I just found out my books are also on sale. If you're in Australia, they're on sale from a bookstore called Better Read Than Dead.
Okay.
Which is the best name for a bookstore I've ever heard in my life.
That is a cool name.
I'm encouraging you to buy them just for that name.
Yeah. So all you folk in Australia, Better Read Than Dead. Yeah. Well, Adam, again, thank you so much. You're welcome on the show anytime. We always love talking to you.
Yeah.
You're fascinating, you're entertaining, and you're an overall good guy, and I really appreciate you being here. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
And so we want to tell everybody out there that if you want to go to irritabledadsyndrome.com, you can download every episode. Search back and listen to the other 2 episodes that Adam was on. They're great episodes. But go and download every episode we have. Go to Patreon, send us some money. Do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
there's videos and there's stuff. If you follow us, all the stuff is on the website. You can also follow us on Facebook, the YouTubes. We've got the Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram.
Don't really do Twitter. I mean,
Adam, are you on Twitter? It's a cesspool.
No, see, that's the thing. Like, I have an account, I think, because there was that time in my life where I felt like I should have this.
Yeah.
And then I was, if I can take credit for being a trendsetter here, I was among the first to find Twitter very depressing.
Yeah.
So I stopped using it years ago, and like when I tried to cancel my account, I couldn't even remember my password anymore. So it's just my account is still sitting there untouched. I'm not sure how to get to it now, and I'm not going to start a new account so I can get rid of the old account.
So don't look up Adam on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, everybody, thanks for listening, and we hope to see you next week on Irritable Dad Syndrome.
Irritable Dad Syndrome is a Mike Odell, Darren Cox production.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet our mother-in-laws for Game 1. Mother-in-law number 1 hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She has 2 son-in-laws, and what's more, they like her. Meet Mrs. Mary Batch.
Forget about her. Nip it in the bud.